Welcome back to Mr. Restaurant. I'm Will Knox, and I am pleased, very, very pleased to welcome an entrepreneur, a media producer and host, a second generation restaurateur, and that's Brad Johnson, who has an acclaimed history as a hospitality specialist with venues in New York, Las Vegas, Los Angeles. His first job was working for his father in the Cellar. Actually, that was the name of the restaurant in the Upper West Side of Manhattan in the early 70s. He then went on to the other side of the arc to become a James Beard winning semifinalist in 2022 for his restaurant Post and Beam, which is a stellar spot in South Los Angeles. He also produces and hosts currently the Corner Table Talk, not the Corner Table, it's Corner Table Talk. And it features a unique blend of guests with inspiring stories in the sports and entertainment and hospitality and publishing worlds. And they share their unique points of view on topics of food and drink and culture. He's also an accomplished writer. He's published in various publications such as the Oxford American. He's published in Bon Appetit, James Beard Foundation, and LA Eater. I think of him as the Miles Davis of hospitality, and I'm really delighted to call him a colleague and a friend. Welcome, Mr. Hospitality, Brad Johnson, to Mr. Restaurant.
What's happening, Will? So good to see you, man. And
Like the
great
Miles
to be
reference?
here. Thank you. I do.
You are smooth, man. You are really smooth, and that's why I think of you as Miles Davis.
Oh, thank you.
Now, let's just dive into this right away and tell me about where you were born. That's what I want to get into the roots of Brad Johnson. People need to know who you are, the substance of you.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody's dying to know. Thank you, Will. I was born in New York City at in Mount Sinai Hospital on the Upper East Side, and it's a funny story. My wasn't funny then, but it's funny now. My dad was African American. My mom was Italian, and not until I would say very late in life, we'll put it that way, did I realize that on my birth certificate, my mom's maiden name was Philomena Martha Notar Angelo. You don't get more Italian than that.
Philomena.
But Philomena Martha Notar Angelo.
Okay.
And you remember the old boxes, they may still have them on birth certificates where they had your race, where you put
Yes.
your race. And it was Negro for my mom. And I thought the hospital filled that out because my mom was olive complected and my dad was black. So I thought they just assumed she was black also. And I didn't find out until just a few years ago that my dad actually filled it out that way because they were born, you have to remember, in the early 50s when interracial marriage was still illegal in a lot of places. And my father feared that if they had gotten stopped somewhere or pulled over and he asked to show for whatever reason my birth certificate, if it showed that my mom was white, they could be arrested. So little interesting tidbit. But New York City was my birthplace.
And so did you have siblings?
I'm an only child until recently. I found out that I actually knew that she existed, but in all honesty, we didn't get reunited until a couple of days before my mom's passing. My mom had a daughter. She was married to an Italian gentleman before my dad, and long story short, my mother's family disowned her when she divorced her first husband and got connected with a Negro. Again, it's the 50s. And she'd had a daughter. And Carol and I reunited on my mom's, during my mom's final days. And she asked us to please make an effort to get to know one another. So my whole life, I thought of myself as an only child, but I have a sister, Carol.
That must be still somewhat comforting to know that you do have a sibling, now that you've reconnected with.
Yeah. I had a memorial for my mom. You mentioned Post and Beam. My mom passed in 2018. We had a nice brunch for her. I invited just 20 of my dear friends. And we just spoke about my mom. And Carol came to that. And one of my friends walked in and saw Carol. She looked so much like my mom. He was like, "What the F word bomb?" But yeah, it's a developing relationship. I'll put it that way. But she's lovely, and I look forward to getting to know her.
I've been married 36 years. I'm still developing. I'm in the dark room. What can I tell you? And so was it confusing for you though, growing up mixed race? I mean, did you identify with one or the other? I mean, tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, it wasn't until I was in fifth grade, Will, that I was made aware that race was even a thing. I was on a playground, first day of school in a mostly black schools. I had gone to a Catholic school prior to that and just had kind of an easy childhood up until that point. But anyway, I went to the school and during a kickball game, one of the kids was calling me half breed. And I thought he was being my friend and, just kind of buddying, but little did I know he was teasing me. So that was the first time that I really became aware of it. And again, I'm 65 years old. So this is in the 60s when I'm in fifth grade. And there weren't a lot of mixed kids around. You were black or you were white, and there were some Latino kids, but it was not the ethnic mix that we see, the diversity that we see these days. So yeah, it took a long time for me. I identified as African American and, found myself trying to, having to go out of my way to prove my blackness because I had curly hair and lighter skin and lighter eyes and looked different. And that really led me down not the best course that fortunately my mom was astute enough to pull me back from. So yeah, I had
Wait a
a little
second.
trouble identifying.
How did you compensate? What were you doing to assimilate?
Well, you remember the Converse All Stars that
Sure.
we used to beg our parents to spend $10 on. So I dipped a toothpick in bleach and wrote Black Power on my Converse All Stars. I hid the fact that I had a white mom. I didn't like to bring anybody to my house. Um, it were and more behavioral issues. I just had to act out in a way that would, in my own mind, made me feel accepted. And that pattern repeated itself for me throughout my young life. And I'd like to think I know who I am at this stage in life, but it was a circuitous route for sure.
So for me, who's a upper middle class white kid growing up in San Francisco in the 60s. I'm a kid who was very fortunate in 1967. I was 16 years old, the summer of love when my parents got divorced. So, it's a different identity. You were on the East Coast. I was on the West Coast. I was a white kid, white Jewish kid. You were mixed race. I mean, different things coming at you, but I didn't have that pressure. I'm sure I was in a very, very diverse school all the way into my high school when I went to more of a less diverse school for 54 young men. But ostensibly ours is a different route, and I'm interested in how that played into your development into your later life. And of course, when you left, quote, the city, were you in Manhattan when you were growing up, or were you outside?
Yeah, my parents divorced when I was 10, and we were living in New York City. We moved for a short time to just across the George Washington Bridge to New Jersey, and that was when things kind of fell apart. And when my parents divorced, I split my time between New York and New Jersey. And so I got, that life. But then I went away to prep school, pretty soon after that. So, well, yeah, I mean, I think of the West Coast. I always thought of the West Coast as just a permissive, you know, the love, the world of love and interracial relationships. I was always drawn to UCLA, and I played basketball, so the Bruins were always, life in Southern California, man, just looked idyllic. And I know Northern California is not quite Southern California, but San Francisco was a cool town. But
Fair.
as someone growing up Jewish, I mean, you certainly knew what it was like to feel discrimination and to feel targeted because of that. I think we probably have that in common.
Yes, and I think for many many years the African American experience and the Jewish experience were very much aligned because of the persecution over the years. You know, yes, I believe that certainly that was a common theme.
Yeah.
Did you, when you left Manhattan and were formative in your teens, did you follow a pretty straight and narrow path, or when did you get involved with your dad's restaurant, or were you doing anything before that that led you into this quote world of restaurants? What were you doing?
No, I started working with my father bought the restaurant in 73. I think I was 17 at the time, 16 or 17. And I started working in the dish room with him, as you mentioned. And then I ended up just, I played basketball. I had a basketball scholarship to UMass at Amherst. And they also happened to have a fantastic hotel restaurant. It's HRTA, Hotel Restaurant and Travel Administration program. And I figured, if basketball didn't work out, I might as well study the hotel restaurant management. So I did that. And during the summers, I was living in the city with my dad and would work in the restaurant. So dishwasher, busser, bartender. And then he finally threw a blazer on me and told me to get out on the floor and start shaking hands. So it felt as shy as I was, Will, and as growing up as an only child, I wasn't. I liked the company of people around, but as a shy person, it was not an easy, fluid transition for me to just walk up to folks and ask them how their dinner
So your dad
is.
was more gregarious.
Tremendously, yeah. He could speak to any. He could talk the paint off of a wall. So
And
yeah.
he was a front of the house guy, or did he get in the back of the house as well?
Totally front of the house. He was the first black clothing salesman at a downtown men's department store. He worked for Paul Stewart, and
Oh,
my father was an impeccable dresser, and that and very social, very gregarious, smart, could talk to anyone. And found himself hanging out quite a bit. It was initially one of the issues that he had being married. But he was spending a lot of time at the bars at the Upper West Side and in Harlem, and decided at one point when the Cellar became available that he would purchase it, and he did, and it fit like a glove. It was tailor made for him.
was it indeed a cellar?
It was two steps down from the street.
Cool. Reminds me of the Grill on the Alley in Beverly Hills. Some
uh,
little akin to that.
yeah, a little slightly different clientele, but yeah, a little couple steps down.
That. I get that. Nothing like the clientele of
No, not quite.
in the alley, but he really was catering to that world, which was the Upper West Side. I mean, was it primarily white folk, or was it, a mixed bag?
Well, interestingly enough, of course, during the Harlem Renaissance in the years following, Black entertainment life flourished in Harlem. And then in the 70s, the drugs took over, and a lot of more affluent Black folks started to migrate to the Upper West Side. And for any of those in your audience that aren't familiar with New York, Harlem is north of the Upper West Side, so they migrated a little bit south. And so in our neighborhood, there were actually 4 Black-owned nightclub, bar, restaurants: McKell's, which was a famous jazz place, Russ Brown's, Brody's, Cellar. And so the neighborhood was very mixed, but our clientele was 99.9% Black. And it was a really interesting social experiment for me, and learning experience for me. I used to watch white folks come to the top of the stairs and take a look around the room and see a Black faces and turn around and walk out.
Wow.
And that never left me. I was always just aware of that, and had wanted them to come in. Tell you something interesting that happened though, Will. We were trying to promote the early week dinner hour, and I decided to do like some street promotion, and did up some flyers and hired a couple of guys, and we just canvassed the radius around the restaurant. So a few nights later, I come into the restaurant to set up for dinner at 5:30, and I see we had booths in the center of the room, and I see the top of someone's head in a booth. And I go over, and the guy's reading the New York Times, and nobody else is in the dining room. And I peek around to say hello to him. It's JFK Jr. And I said, "Man, what are you doing here? How did you find out about us?" He says, "I got a flyer." And he and I became friends, man, until his passing.
He paid attention for sure.
Yeah, man.
God bless.
He lived around the corner. He lived in a brownstone on, I think, 89th Street.
So when you were in Massachusetts and you were pursuing, quote, a basketball lifestyle, you did have dreams of going in the NBA? I mean, was that something that was, hey, if I could go into the NBA, I'm not interested in the restaurant world?
Well, I don't think there's a kid that's ever bounced a basketball that didn't think he should
I
go to
stopped
the
growing when I got to 5'5". It was over.
I'm sure you were a great point guard.
Junior high school, I was great. I was the only white kid on the team, by the way. They used to call me Blue-Eyed Soul Brother. Okay.
Yeah, man. I definitely had dreams. I played all 4 years.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I had a good outside shot, but not quite what I wasn't scholarship material.
Right. They just didn't notice. Well, I'm sure you had talent.
But you were in Massachusetts, so there's a different world coming into Manhattan then.
Well, yeah, UMass was, they actually, the Julius Erving went to UMass a few years before I did. Wow. And that led to an influx of Black ball players from New York City going to UMass. So I was actually, in fact, I do a text chain with my UMass teammates these days, and we're on regular rotation. But yeah, there were quite a few of us from New York City. And yeah, I had dreams. I played 4 years there. I finished really strongly. I'll brag about it for a minute, but my best game was against Rory Sparrow at Villanova. The next to the last game of my career, I had 27 points on Rory, and he went on to play for the Knicks, and I went on to work at the Cellar.
Any more?
Which I'm not mad about.
Any more illustrious guys you played against?
Norm Nixon, who became a tremendous friend. In fact, I just stayed with Norm Nixon and his wife, Debbie Allen, when I was in Los Angeles last. We've been business partners at Roxbury, Georgia. They've been just tremendous.
I just got the high sign from Dr. D. We got 2 minutes before we got to go to break. So you'll tell me more about this a little bit later in the show. So that's fascinating. So you play against Norm Nixon, then he becomes your business partner?
Yeah. And really good friend, lifelong friend. Yeah.
Well, but you were in New York until when?
I moved from New York City to Los Angeles in 1989.
And what prompted that move? I mean, were you saying, I'm tired of New York, the East Coast, the weather, I'm chasing I'm chasing something. I don't know. And these days I got to be politically correct, he, she, they, it, whatever you were chasing, what brought you out West?
A combination of those things that you mentioned. I had gone out on my own, opened several restaurants, and went through a tricky business relationship and had a restaurant that I loved, that I was working with Ashford and Simpson, the famous husband and wife songwriting team. I reconceptualized a failing restaurant into a brilliant cabaret, but the headwinds from tax trouble overcame us, and we ended up closing. I ended up back at the Cellar and feeling like I had failed. And
was that the Memphis restaurant?
Well, I did Memphis, Coastal, 107 West, and then I did 2020 with Nick and Val. And I sold my interest in those other restaurants to do that with Nick and Val. And then when that went under, I went back and was at the Cellar and feeling like I had failed. So I was ready for a change.
Did you create the Memphis restaurant? Was that your baby entirely?
I had partners, but yeah, I was the only one that had any real restaurant experience.
What was the first restaurant you created that you ideated on? The first one?
Probably, well, Memphis to a great deal. A lot of me went into that, but Roxbury, I would say, was that I thought of the name. I had the concept for 3 levels of entertainment from having done 2020. And I thought that LA, being a driving culture, would enjoy a place they could go to 7 o'clock dinner, 9 o'clock jazz or blues downstairs, and then hang out at a club without having to get back in their car. And I raised most, if not all, of the money for Roxbury.
All right. Well, I want to get into that after this break because Dr. D just told me we're going to take a break right now. We'll be right back with Brad Johnson. I'm Will Knox, Mr. Restaurant. Stay tuned, folks. There's a lot more to go with Brad, the Miles Davis of hospitality.
All right. Ready? 3, 2.
Hold on one second. Off camera. I'm still powdering my nose. Hello. Okay, here we go. We're back to it.
In 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. I'm Will Knox, and I'm with Brad Johnson, who hosts Corner Table Talk, a podcast that deals with all things related to culture, food, and drink. I'm just dealing with the restaurant biz with Mr. Restaurant. I just thought that there was a kind of an opening in this podcast world for, and it's not really a podcast, I must say. It's a radio show and Zoomcast, courtesy of the Jeremiah Show, of which I'm affiliated. I'm affiliated with the Jeremiah Show, Jeremiah Higgins. Mr. Restaurant is an adjunct to that. And I thought, Brad, that there was an opening for the restaurant sector, not the food per se, but the business of restaurants. I wanted to approach it because of my background in restaurant real estate and concept development. And that's what got me into this podcast, Zoomcast radio show. So welcome to Mr. Restaurant. I'm glad to have you, man.
It's great to be here, Will. Love talking to you always.
Before the break, we started to get into your ideation, and particularly with coming west from New York. You're a young guy. How old are you at the time? 22 or something?
30, 31.
30. Were you married? Anything holding?
No, I left a girlfriend that I loved. We lived together, and I could still picture her face. My wife doesn't get mad at me for saying this, but when I walked down the hallway to the elevator and pressed it, I knew that I was leaving her. We'd hoped that we'd be able to withstand the distance, but we were not able to. But
and yes. Your wife we can refer to as
Linda.
Linda. Okay, the infamous Linda.
Yes.
She's pretty extraordinary, I understand, and certainly does your social media. Fantastic.
Very lucky.
So we're all lucky to have good spouses for sure. It's a very, very important thing to help us in this world called the restaurant scene, because that is not an easy deal. So when you came out here, did you know many people, or how did you feel comfortable off the bat? Where'd you move to right away?
Well, I had met, of course, Norm. Norm and Debbie had been in New York, and Debbie was fantastic for me at Memphis. She brought Eddie Murphy parties, the Cosby Show parties, Stevie Wonder parties. She really launched our catering business. Debbie,
well, they were prime time. Right? I mean, they were. He was Showtime, and she was prime time. They were both at the top of their game, right?
Oh yeah.
And you connect.
So, and again, they've just been so great to me. But anyway, Norm had said, "Hey, man, if you ever decide you want to come to California, we could do something together." So I hung on to that, and I'd met a guy named Eli Samaha, that name you probably know.
I do know.
I met him. I was on vacation with my father at the Villa Vera Hotel in Acapulco, Mexico. My father loved playing tennis, and they had great clay tennis courts, so I took him there on vacation. And Eli and his brother Dimitri were in the pool that day, and we became friends, and they wanted to go into the restaurant club business. And so one thing led to another. I moved to LA. I initially lived in Marina del Rey, connected with Eli, connected with Norm, and Roxbury. Roxbury was born. I brought a few New York buddies out, Chris Breed, John Enos, John Long, and put together. Norm helped me raise the funds, and Roxbury.
What was the initial raise for that?
Believe it or not, Will, this would be security deposit.
$89.
Yeah, close to. I think it was 400 grand. We each put up.
You took over an empty space on Sunset Boulevard? near
We
Crescent
took
High?
over what was the Imperial Gardens.
Yes.
But actually, I did a little digging, and prior going way back, it was owned. In fact, he just passed away, I think, last year. It was owned by the director Preston Sturgis. No, I'm sorry, Bob Rafelson just passed away, who lived behind us at the Roxbury. But anyway, Preston Sturgis owned a place called the Players Club, and at that location, and I was able to locate his son, and he sent me images of the Players Club from the 40s with the cars in front. It was incredible. But yeah, so that was three-story location right in front of the Chateau Marmont.
And it was across the street from Carlos and Charlie's at the time. Was
That's
that
right.
happening? Yeah. So we're dating ourselves a little bit, but nonetheless, we're
Okay.
going back in the history of the restaurant scene in the late 80s with Brad John. So I'm curious to take it from here. You're going in and looking at a second gen, what we call a second gen space, and you've got $400,000 raised. But I'm curious about how you were thinking about the concept. I mean, when it first came to you, I mean, okay, you're in the pool in Acapulco, you meet these guys, and did they have the lease, or who was controlling the
No,
space?
no, not at all. And I didn't even know, Will, that you found the original Spago. I mean, that's like in the record books, that's like, one of the greatest restaurant spaces of all time.
That was my
And
first restaurant deal.
I know that's incredible, man. Where do you go from there?
Well, I ended up working with Peter Morton in the Hard Rock Cafe and
You
doing
did all right.
all the
Yeah,
initial stuff. So I've
you
got
did
a
okay.
little bit
Yeah,
of that too. So
yeah.
I was very,
Um,
very blessed, man.
yeah, man. Yeah, no, absolutely, Will. I mean, you have a nose for space, Will. And I'm glad that we're spending some time talking about this aspect of the business because it starts there, right? It starts with location, 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 of course. But space is that intangible kind of thing that you feel, that that you don't feel, and you move on. We looked around for several locations. We looked downtown. I think Vertigo was happening at that time. We looked downtown. We almost got the where the House of Blues ended up going.
Yes.
Isaac Brett beat us to that by a couple of days. We almost took that over. It was a restaurant prior to them tearing it down. Do you remember that restaurant, Will?
Yes, it was called Butterfields, I think.
Butterfields.
I,
Yep. Sammy Davis Jr.'s
yeah, kind of went down
altitude.
into his
Yeah.
stairs. Really
Yep. So
kind
we almost took that
of,
space.
yeah.
And then he showed me Imperial Gardens, and I was like, this is it. So, 3 levels, again, as I mentioned, wanting to do everything kind of, one-stop shop. So folks could park their cars and spend the night with us. And when we
Pre-Uber,
peeled
by the way.
off,
Pre-Uber.
pre-Uber, yep, everybody's valet. We peeled off, if you remember, the third floor faced Sunset, which faces south, because Roxbury was on the north side of the street. So anything on the north side of the street facing south gets that great view, that sweeping view. So we went up to the third floor, and they had a sushi room that had all these pads and blockages around the room. We peeled those off, and they were windows with the view south and either way on Sunset, and that became our VIP room.
And that was really what Spago was about, because Spago had the ability to look out on all of, quote, the southern view of the lights, the twinkle of.
That's right.
So that was a very prominent real estate, position to have.
Yep. Yep.
Dr.
And
D.
Bernard was the maitre d', right?
Say that again.
Wasn't Bernard the maitre d'
Yes.
at Spago?
Well, there were quite a few of over time. Yes, you're exactly right.
That's the one I remember.
Yeah. All right, listen, we got to take another break, and we'll be right back with Brad Johnson. I'm Mr. Restaurant, Will Knox. Stay tuned. We're coming back.
All right. Good.
Powdering my nose once again. It's cold in here. Brad, thank you, man.
Hey, man.
I'm having fun. This is going really quickly, which is it's a good sign.
Yeah. I like this for you, man.
Thank you very much.
All right.
It's great.
Next segment in 3, 2.
We're back. I'm Will Knox, and I'm with Brad Johnson. He is Mr. Hospitality. I will tell you, Brad's got some stories from the restaurants he's been involved with to the clubs to now his own podcast, which is a great show, which you got to listen to, called Corner Table Talk. By the way, on Corner Table Talk, I'm digressing a little bit. You have Ambassador Shabazz on that show. Tell me a little bit about her and why you brought her into your podcast. She comes in at the end of your show, right?
Yeah, she does. She listens through the episodes.
Malcolm X's daughter.
Yeah, she is the eldest daughter of Dr. Betty Shabazz and Malcolm X, and we are childhood friends. I call her my sister. She is just, one of the most unique people that I've ever met. She has just this calming presence about her. She's got a worldview, world vision, and she's got the best heart of anybody you'd ever meet. She's always doing everything for anybody and everybody, kids, you name it. So I thought it would be great to have her join me and just kind of give a little summation of the conversations that we had, and then tell us about some of the cool stuff she's doing. So that's what we do with
stellar show, and she's a great addition to it. And
thank you.
You mentioned the calm, and now I'm going to segue out of that into the calm of your life, because you're a really calm guy. And I think of calm when I go into a space, a real estate space, because I know it's going to be chaotic and all the rest, but I get the feng shui. And if you don't have that feng shui, I tell a client, forget it. I don't care how great the deal is. You got to fall in love with the location, and you got to fall in love with the whole vibe. You know, the numbers may come around and be great, but unless you've got that real feeling, and you must have had that with Roxbury.
I've had that several times in my life. And yeah, when you feel that, there's no denying it. It's just that magic that, you know, if you do your job well, that space is going to complement what it is you're trying to do. And I had certainly had that with Roxbury. I had it with Georgia. I had it with Memphis and New York. And Post and Beam was different. I don't want to get ahead of the conversation, but we basically tore that building down and created a building. But I once we created the building, I had that feeling there as well.
So from Roxbury, did you have a business plan? I mean, like a hard analytical business plan, or with you just with these guys and you're saying, hey, I got $400,000 and we're going to put it to work? And was it really kind of seat of the pants kind of deal, or was it really an analytical, business like, situation? I mean, here you were coming in LA, so you got to be pretty buttoned up. How did that come about?
It was more or less the former. I mean, what we basically did was tell folks, look, $20,000. You're going to have a great time. We'll treat you really well. You get a good table. We'll drop the red velvet rope for you and your friends. You can spare 20 grand. Come on in. And we had to write up something formal because we were taking people's money, but it was not based on a business plan in terms of enticing people to get involved. I mean, we had Raj Kanodi, a very well-known plastic surgeon. We had Michael Littman, who was big in the music industry. Michael actually led us to our first party for Bernie Taupin, who was Elton John's songwriting partner. And that was our first party for Bernie. And we were off to the races. But no, there was a business plan only for the purpose of being able to take money. But
how long was the payback on that?
Well, we actually, Norm and I got a little contentious with the other partners. Norm and I had to have a meeting with them, and we, discovered a few things. But we basically said we're moving on. Our investors and our team are we are demanding our money, because there was the I don't want to get into too much detail, but let's say 2 years was the payback, and everybody got out.
In the restaurant business, the norm used to be about 36 months when you get paid back. And the crossover, what we call the crossover, where the investors versus the general partners versus limited partners crosses over generally when they're paid back in, say, 36 months. And nowadays, it takes you even longer because these budgets are really huge.
I thought you were going to say 36 years.
Yeah, well, I'm still waiting on one of my deals, but nonetheless, well, it's not in Silicon Valley Bank, I might say. So. God willing. Let's pray for all of us. So listen, you went from Roxbury and then you said to yourself, now what? Or did you have another opportunity when Georgia reared its head? How did that
Well, yeah, I was tired, man. You know, owning a nightclub is no different than just hanging out 5 nights a week. I mean, whether you drink,
you weren't married to Linda at this time.
I was not. No.
Got it.
Um,
So you were married to
Fortunately,
business.
I've never been a drinker. Drugs are not, my thing. Smoked a little weed, whatever, but nothing hardcore. So I was able to maintain my balance, but it's rough stuff, man. I was New York, I was up till 4 a.m. That, look, you could serve until 4 a.m. in New York. LA, it was last call at 1:45, but you're getting home at 3, 4. It's a rough life. And I just wanted to get back to the restaurant business. And a woman that was married to Karen Gordy, found the space that became Georgia on Melrose. She brought it to my attention. I loved it, great patio. And I said, I really would like to do a Southern restaurant. Initially, Denzel and I, who were friends, Denzel Washington and I, who were friends, became a partner in Georgia. We wanted to bring a restaurant out from New York that we loved called Jezebel. And that deal became undoable, but we were going to take the space that became, what's the sushi place on La Cienega? Just drove Koi, became Koi. But before that, going way back, you would probably know, Will, it was a little French restaurant.
What was it before?
It was a French restaurant of some kind.
L'Hermitage, I think.
L'Hermitage.
Right?
Yep.
Boy, we are dating ourselves, man.
I'm telling you, man.
At least we're above the roots, so that's a good day.
Yeah, so myself, Denzel, and Benny Medina, who is J-Lo's manager, we were going to do Jezebel there, and the Jezebel deal became undoable. We ended up doing Georgia, and with the backdrop of, and I really, all through my life, maybe because of the fact that I come from mixed ethnicity, I always wanted to bring people together. Of all, I'm down with everybody, and Georgia, we opened very purposely. Black and white investors, Lou Adler, Connie Stevens, Eddie Murphy, Kareem, Denzel. I mean, we had a lineup, and we wanted, white hostesses, black hostesses, servers, gay, straight. I mean, you name it, we had everything. And the backdrop, though, was the Rodney King verdict. And if you remember, LA was very polarized during this time. And then after a few years, we were open and we're doing very well. The OJ verdict hits. And again, Black folks celebrating, not OJ necessarily, but the fact that finally won a court case.
Vindicated in court.
Pardon?
They were vindicated in court.
Right. And nobody, not that everybody thought OJ was innocent. It wasn't that. It was just cheering for victory, and white folks were aghast. So we have a victory party at Georgia, and Johnny Cochran called me right after the victory, right after they won. The not guilty verdict was announced. He called me that day and said, man, we'd like to bring the victory party to Georgia. I was like, whoa, man. He said, don't worry, OJ's not coming. He's going to do something else. And I called Denzel. I said, man, what should we do? And he said, man, we're a restaurant, have them come, because they had been coming there during the trial. So anyway, I set up a local newscaster friend of mine, Pat Harvey, with an exclusive interview with Johnny Cochran at 6 o'clock. She does it. On the monitor, it says live from Georgia Restaurant on Melrose Avenue. I go into the restaurant right adjacent to where we had shot that. And all 4 of our phone lines rang, were going off. And N-word, N-word, N-word. We're going to blow up that effing place for 45 minutes. I handed the phone, Debbie Allen was in there. I handed the phone to Debbie. I said, Debbie, listen to this. And Will, it was a local news station, which, I don't know what the broadcast range is, but we weren't talking about Mississippi, you know? So that's some of the context that we dealt with Georgia, but nonetheless, it was a great experience.
And how long did that experience last?
I stayed, I actually sold my interest in Georgia to do the Sunset Room in 2000.
So then you went back to the Strip and did the Sunset Room, and that's 2000. And then you have a lapse till like 2012 when you open up Post and Beam. Is that right? Was there
not quite a lapse?
I shouldn't say
we took over Windows when Magic Johnson and his group purchased the Transamerica building downtown
LA.
Yep.
So that was Top
from a six-figure loser to a multiple six-figure winner, and did quite well down there. I opened Menemsha just before that, and actually Windows helped me recover the losses that I had sustained from Menemsha, which was a tough run. And then I did BLT.
I could never pronounce Menemsha, even to this day. And I know that
Martha's Vineyard, man. What do you mean?
No, I know that.
I gave you the roadmap to the vineyard.
But at the time, I'm just this guy in, West Hollywood living, and I'm going, Menemsha? What is Menemsha?
I figured if they could say Matsuhisa, they could say Menemsha.
Well, you were right. Did that spot, it was a great concept because it dealt with New England and Crab Shack and, lobster rolls, and I love it to this day. And you're my inspiration in Martha's Vineyard because you told me exactly where to go every step of the way over a 5-day period in Martha's Vineyard. Eat here for breakfast, eat here for lunch. And it got me around the vineyard. Food became my journey. It was right. My guide. You were my guide. But Menemsha, which is, a cool word, it suffered, right?
We got caught in a terrible economy. It was just after I was raising money for Menemsha when 9/11 hit. And if you remember, the restaurant economy sucked right after that, man. It was tough. And
I'm going to stop you on suck because Dr. D is telling me we got to take a break. So let's stop on suck, and we'll come back with Brad Johnson. I'm Mr. Restaurant, Will Knox. Stay tuned.
All right, we're clear. Interesting way to end the segment. All right, this is our final segment, and you have, according to the clock, you have about 8 minutes.
We've got 8 minutes, and I want to get into Post and Beam.
3,
okay,
2, 1.
All right, we left with suck and Menemsha, but really one of the things that I thought about Menemsha was that perhaps the location was a little bit off. Did you have any vibe on that?
The location was tricky, Will, no question about it. And that was one of those times I took a chance knowing that and see what happens. But on the last night, my wife, Linda, who I wasn't married to at the time, but we were together, she saved me on that one. Our last night of business was a Saturday night. The restaurant was packed. Steven Spielberg was there. Ted Danson was there. I mean, these are vineyard lovers. And we were packed, but I knew we were closing. That was our last night. No one in the room knew. And I went out back, man, and I cried. I bawled. It really was painful. I hated losing that place, man. And losing people's money. I had friends that had invested. It was a really, 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 really tough blow.
Well, it shows how you have your heart and soul into it. And most operators don't have your degree of that heart and soul, but you've got to have that grit. And you stayed with it because after Menemsha, you did some other projects on the west side of LA, right? Didn't you stay in Venice and do?
That came later. That came after Post and Beam. We did Willie Jane.
Willie Jane. Well, let's talk about Post and Beam for a second.
Sure.
More than a second, because it's really an acclaimed restaurant to this day. And how did that really come about? It's in South LA in Baldwin Hills, correct?
Yeah. I remember talking to you, and you used the expression, you're going to have some tough sledding there. And I was like, damn. And you know what, Will? You weren't wrong. It was not the easiest project, but it was maybe the most fulfilling project I've ever done. We were able to sell the restaurant in 2019 to our young African-American chef and his wife, John and Ronnie Cleveland. The place has gone on to get James Beard Awards, as you've mentioned, the Jonathan Gold Award. Jonathan was a big fan of Post and Beam. Amy Scattergood from the LA Times wrote a fantastic piece about us when we moved on. We had some real Mona Holmes from Eater LA has been tremendously kind to Post and Beam. And the community just rallied, man. They rallied around that restaurant, and it was such a fulfilling experience. I'm really happy for John and Ronnie, who continue to operate. I met with John last week, and Post and Beam is doing well.
Well, I thought it was a great idea because the area had not had a fine dining. I call it fine dining. It wasn't casual dining, wasn't quick service restaurant. It was a restaurant that was a sit down spot with great cuisine. I was nervous that the white folk wouldn't come over to South LA because this is, still precarious, area, that perception. So getting the crossover, but you were successful because you got the locals and you uplifted that scene to such a degree that the white folks said, I got to be part of this. I got to see this. And, I applaud you for that, because the crossover is difficult in the best of times, and you pursued it and you persevered and you made it.
Well, thank you. I have to give a great deal of credit for that to Goldman Armstrong, who, as you know, is a very well-known name locally and nationally.
Yeah, top chef.
Goldman just brought the artistry with the food and the commitment. And he was early in the on-site garden. We had an on-site garden there before folks were really talking about that. And Goldman is a tremendous teacher, took John under his wing. And I don't think Goldman Armstrong gets enough credit and should be one of those culinary heroes that is celebrated along with some of the bigger names that we hear about. But I take my hat off to Goldman and was really, really appreciative that he decided to join me in that journey.
How would you characterize his cuisine there?
We did a version of, we didn't know it at the time, but California soul. Pizza was one of the things that we thought we wanted to have. We wanted it to be a very family environment. Norman Debbie had a dance academy just across the parking lot from us, so we knew families would be dropping in. So we made the pizza oven our focal point. It's funny, I just had the co-founder of California Pizza Kitchen on, Rick Rosenfield, and he talked about the first California Pizza Kitchen having that oven.
He just opened up a place in the Palisades, right?
Palisades, yeah. Roman. Great concept.
Yeah, Roman idea.
You got to see it. But we centered the concept around the pizza oven. We did a kind of mid-century vibe, post and beam, this mid-century style of architecture, post and beams, and a lot of that architecture sprinkled throughout the hills of Baldwin Hills, Dare Heights, and View Park. So Goldman's food was thoughtful. It was ingredient driven. That's his style. He has a way of bringing the best flavor out of whatever he works with without overwhelming you with sauces and different and spices. He knows how to enhance every plate that he touches. And when it came down to do the Southern stuff that we needed to nail, the macaroni and cheese, the collard greens, and the cornbread, Goldman hit it out of the park.
So you would think of him as a culinary hero. I think of you as a hero that would be featured in what I would like to see happen, a restaurant hall of fame. What do you think of that idea?
You're asking a restaurateur what he thinks of that idea? This is a setup, man. Of course. Yeah, well, look, I don't think the restaurateur has been fully recognized,
I agree with that.
Otherwise. And I grew up, with heroes, Joe Allen, my father, Buzzy O'Keefe, front of house guys who really, and women, Alberta Wright, who really, really got it, what it took to welcome people and run an establishment and keep the whole thing moving and take on all of the burden of signing the lease, raising the funds. I don't think that conversation's fully been had. So sign me up for your Hall of Fame, Restaurateur Hall of Fame.
Where do you think it should be located? I've been trying to figure out if I could put a steering committee together. It's a long-term project, of course. But as we have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, oh, Dr. D, you're telling me 1 minute and then we got to go hard out? Okay, enough of the Hall of Fame. We'll get to that later. Listen, Brad, quickly, how do people contact you if they ever want to?
Well, at Corner Table Talk is our Instagram. I can be reached at brad@postandbeamhospitality.com. That's brad@postandbeamhospitality.com. And I'm responsive, Will. People reach out and I hit back. So, but I have to tell you, man, I am really proud of you for this new chapter.
Thank you.
And to draw on your experience, I think is extremely valuable. And you've always been just a great gentleman and a really valuable source for information. So I'm saluting you.
Well, I think we reflect each other, and I got to show you something right now. I got 2 pages of questions. Whoops, I got 2 pages of questions, and I haven't hit on any of them because you're just so conversational. It's been a ball, man.
I
Unbelievable.
talk too damn much.
You know, really, this has been great. I think I got to do chapter 2 with you.
Anytime.
We're gonna have Brad Johnson back on Mr. Restaurant. I am Mr. Restaurant. I'm not the Mr. Restaurant, but I'm Mr. Restaurant, and I'm part of the Jeremiah Show, which should be listened to, watched on YouTube, and all points in between. I'm Will Knox. I've been with Brad Johnson, and this has been just a fabulous hour. Thank you so much, Brad.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Thank you, Will.
Until we eat again, I'm Will Knox.